Every organization requires a hub center, one that can take the true decisions, the one that has the power to turn debates and discussions into action. And in case of the United Nations, that responsibility goes to the Security Council. The Security Council is the executive organ of the United Nations, and in fact, it is the most important and effective organ of the United Nations responsible for maintaining international peace and security. It is the only organ of the United Nations which can take decisions and can execute actions on its own. And the Charter of the United Nations itself gives it the primary task of maintaining international peace and security. So let us learn a little more about this organ of the United Nations, the Security Council, a glimpse of which we can see in this picture over here. The United Nations Security Council is constituted of 15 member nations, each having their own permanent representatives. Now, these permanent representations of these 15 member nations are located in the UN headquarters present in New York City. Now, the reason why these 15 member nations have permanent representatives at the headquarters is because the Security Council meets once every month. And that is why they need to be present at all times to attend these sessions. In fact, the Security Council often has special sessions or emergency sessions during crises. And for all these reasons, these nations need to have a permanent representation at the headquarters itself. The Security Council is presided upon by a president who is selected by turn basis or by turn-to-turn basis among the member nations of the Security Council, and this is done for each session. So we understand that the president is not a permanent position, and this position is given to all the member nations of the Security Council in turn-to-turn basis, and this is done primarily to add more representation to the leadership structure, and it's also done to eliminate any forms of bias or power holding in the Security Council. Recently, India held the seat of presidency at the Security Council, and we can see a glimpse of that right over here. Now, can you answer this question? How many member states does the Security Council constitute of? Is it 15? Is it 10? Is it 12? Or is it 11? The correct answer is 15. So Security Council has 15 member states. Now that we understand that the Security Council has 15 member states, all member states do not have the same equal status. This is because the Security Council has permanent as well as non-permanent members. Now there are 5 permanent members in the Security Council who are also called the P5 nations. Now, these permanent members are USA, Russia, then we have China, the UK, as well as France. So they make up the P5 grouping. Now why are these nations the permanent nations? This is because the P5 nations do not require any form of election to be a part of the Security Council. They are a permanent part of the United Nations Security Council. On the contrary, the non-permanent members, which are the remaining 10 members, they are elected by the General Assembly for a term of 2 years. Now, the election to the 10 seats of the non-permanent members of the Security Council are distributed in a diverse manner all across the various regions of the world. And we can understand that from the structure over here, where 3 seats are assigned for Africa, 2 seats are assigned for the Asia Pacific region, 2 seats are assigned for the Latin American and the Caribbean region, 2 seats are assigned to the Western European and the other regions of the world, and finally 1 seat is assigned for the Eastern European region. Together they make up the seats for the 10 non-permanent members who are elected by the General Assembly. Now, who are the P5 members? As we already saw, the P5 members refer to the group of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. The P stands for permanent and the 5 is the number of nations which attain this status. Now, these nations again are United Kingdom, the United States of America, then we have Russia, France, and finally there is China. Now the reason why the P5 grouping is important is because these nations act as the powers, the leaders of the modern world. Now the reason why these 5 nations were given the status of permanent membership of the Security Council is because most of them are the victors of the Second World War. Over here we can see United Kingdom, the US, Russia and France were the victorious allies at the end of the Second World War. Now, China was added to this grouping first because it had an adequate contribution to the Second World War to fight against Japan, and second because these nations wanted to restrict the Security Council from becoming a Western dominated bloc. And that is why these are the 5 nations which became the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. These nations are often considered as global powers and they are the ones who lead the world's political forum. But why is it that the permanent membership of Security Council gives such enormous status to these nations? It's because the permanent membership of the Security Council comes with a trump card of sorts, and that is the power of veto. Now, do you want to know what this trump card is which makes these nations so important? Well, to understand that, you have to first look at the voting structure of the Security Council, as the concept of veto is intricately linked with the voting structure of the Security Council. Now, when it comes to decision making or the voting process of the Security Council, each member, despite them being permanent or non-permanent, each member of the Security Council has 1 vote each. And a decision is officially taken when a majority is achieved among these votes, which is a majority vote of at least 9 members. Now we can see various glimpses of voting being done at the Security Council. Till this point, the decision making process looks pretty easy, doesn't it? Well, that is where the veto comes in. Now veto is a Latin word which means I forbid. And this is a special power which is given to the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. Let us see how this particular power is executed. So we understand that the veto power is associated with rejecting something or to create hindrance against something. But how does such a power fit into a decision making process of the permanent members of the Security Council? Now you see, the veto power is the power given to the permanent members to reject any resolution of the Security Council that is being passed, and that is done by simply casting the veto. Therefore, casting a veto is like casting a negative vote because it has the exact opposite meaning of casting a vote. However, this negative vote has more power than any other forms of voting in the Security Council. This is because the moment a P5 or a permanent member of the Security Council passes a veto, all discussions and voting on any resolution gets immediately suspended. The moment a veto is issued against a resolution, no discussion, voting, or even questioning on why the veto is done is allowed. In effect, the veto is a resolution killer. Now, while the other permanent members can obviously support a veto which is casted by another permanent member in order to give more weight to that veto, however, no other permanent member and not even the council as a whole can act against a veto. The Security Council itself is powerless to act against a veto. Now do you understand how this is considered to be a superpower or a trump card for the 5 permanent members of the Security Council? Now let us address this inherent question that must have come to your mind. Is this power of veto good or bad? Is it an effective power, or is it the concentration of too much power in very few hands? The argument in favor of veto states that it is essential for maintaining international stability, as it allows the superpowers to make rapid decisions to deal with situations concerning the world itself. In fact, it can also be a means to stop aggressor nations, ones which are particularly trying to bring about warlike situations within the United Nations Security Council itself. However, the case against veto states that such a concentration of power in a few hands leaves a lot of avenues for misuse. In fact, if we look at this graph over here, it clearly shows how most of the P5 nations had used the veto power in self-interest. That is, they have used the veto power to suspend those resolutions that concern them individually. We can see some particular instances of it over here. First of all, the early USSR vetoes, USSR being the nation which preceded the current day Russia. The early USSR vetoes was mainly to block new members from joining the United Nations. USSR was a communist nation and it did not want the spread of capitalism, and therefore it was against the joining of new members into the United Nations. Moving on, we see that the majority of the vetoes made by USA concerns the Middle East, a region where the US is involved militarily and also has political interests in. Finally, we also see that the majority of vetoes used by United Kingdom in the past concern the former colonial interests of the nation, particularly when the United Kingdom vetoed a resolution concerning the Suez Crisis in Egypt, conflict where UK was also involved in. Thus, we see that this power of veto needs some regulation. Otherwise, the democratic dream of the United Nations will be lost forever. This is because often the misuse of vetoes in the past had created deadlocks in the United Nations system, which had often made the Security Council itself ineffective. Now, a way to deal with this deadlock creating by the vetoing in the Security Council was incepted in the General Assembly, which was known as the Uniting for Peace Resolution. To know more about this resolution, you can click on the link below to access the iDictionary feature. Thus, in this lesson, we learnt about the structure of the United Nations Security Council, the executive organ of the organization. In the subsequent lesson, we shall be looking at the various functions of the Security Council. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at deltastep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers, or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it is rewarding too. So register for free now.